With the most recent financial release from Nintendo, the Nintendo Switch has finally passed the 150 million units sold, while having only 3 different versions of the console available on the market, which are the original Nintendo Switch, the Switch Lite, and the Switch OLED. There's also a revisited version of the original Switch with an improved battery, but that's just a revisited version, not really a separate model. Sales are naturally dropping when comparing the same period from last year. In fact, it went from almost 14 million units sold in the first quarter of 2024 to about 10 million in the first quarter of 2025, so about a 30% drop, which is only natural with the recent announcement of Switch 2 also. This drop is also somewhat reflected in software sales, about 24% drop, which is actually still pretty incredible since we're talking about under 24 million units sold. Basically 12 games every console sold. While no major releases really happen, since most probably every major developer is preparing for Switch 2 titles of their own franchises. Software sales are also incredible when you compare it to other best-selling consoles like the DS, where software sales compared to units sold is almost 10 games per console sold in the case of the Switch, which is incredible even when compared to Wii numbers, a console that was bundled with one or even multiple games in the multitude of offers that were around in those years, like Wii Sports and Wii Sports 2 and such. And while the console sold peaked in 2021, with then a gradual decrease through the years, the annual active playing users have never really dropped and instead kept on rising to its peak in 2024. Keep in mind, all of this happened without the console ever receiving a substantial price drop, especially now in its 8th year when the hardware is incredibly old and cheap to produce, maximizing Nintendo's profit by keeping it at a fair price point. This is a reflection of the amazing planning of the current management and Nintendo, especially when you look at the very clever release of the Lite model first, which occurs at what would have been the first drop for Switch sales, and then with the OLED version that quickly becomes the most sold version or model of the console. These are, at least in my opinion, results of the legacy of Mr. Iwata too and his economic strategy, the Blue Ocean. Before we jump into that, let's consider that this year, 2025, is Nintendo's 135th anniversary, which will happen on September 23rd, and its key and most successful years have definitely been the electronics era. First, with President Hiroshi Yamauchi, who believed in Satoru Iwata since his days at HAL Laboratory or HAL Laboratory, and second, with Satoru Iwata himself, who not only brought Nintendo in their first record evaluation in 2009, when the DS and the Wii were, virtually speaking, a part of everyone's daily life as much as a smartphone is nowadays, but also helped the company get out of its worst years, the Wii U and 3DS era. July 11, 2025 will also be 10 years since the passing of Satoru Iwata, then president of Nintendo. And I realized that time really flies, and maybe some of the people who own a Switch nowadays might have been too young back then to even remember him, or maybe they were not even born yet, which also made me feel, again, really old. I remember the news coming out of nowhere at the time, so let me tell you how awful Nintendo's situation, at least financially, was back then, with the Wii U especially, which I personally bought day one because I was extremely ecstatic, and also I was hyped for the return of Monster Hunter on the big screen after Monster Hunter 3 on the Wii, the regular Wii, with 3 Ultimate on the Wii U, and also for Pokken, believe it or not. Back then, the trailer completely sold me on the game. And the general consensus in the industry in that period was that Iwata should have resigned, that Nintendo should have not made a console after the Wii U anymore, and just become a publisher like Sega, and make games for their beloved overlords Sony. So yeah, funny to look back and now see the Nintendo Switch just 10 million sales short of destroying PS2's own record of 160 million consoles produced, by the way, not sold, because I want to remind you that the number of sold consoles when it comes to PS2 is not actually certain yet. Sony just said 160 million when we have the last produced PlayStation 2 at about 160,600,000 and something. I will put a picture on screen. A quick note I'm making as I'm editing the video. I want you guys to also take this moment to understand that maybe you have people in your life right now that are not supportive of whatever thing you have going on, whatever decisions you're making, and just consider yourself as Nintendo during the Wii U and 3DS era. The best is yet to come. So keep on grinding and remember that hard work never betrays. And Iwata definitely was crucial into bringing Nintendo in the period they're living in right now. Firstly, with the courage he and other directors had back then to reduce their salaries by as much as half in the case of Iwata himself, and about 20 to 30% of the other group of directors, to make sure that nobody was fired during the worst years of the Wii U era, and they decided to take the hit themselves, which was roughly from 2012 to 2015, about that period of time. And then in 2015, Nintendo also started to get themselves back up with the Amiibo, which back then were incredibly popular, and the great 3DS releases. Also, Iwata was the one who had the great idea to expand on the mobile market and saw the potential of mobile games already. Again, we're talking 2014, 2015, the period of time when some of the most successful mobile games right now, like Fate Grand Order, Dragon Ball Z Dokkan Battle, didn't even release yet or were about to release. As an example, Dokkan Battle is just now living its 10th anniversary, so we're talking about January 2015 it was released. And again, if you don't know how successful that is, that game earned Bandai $3 billion in this past 10 years, so it was definitely a success. And what comes out for Nintendo in 2016? Pokemon Go. So yeah, another incredible success that Iwata saw before anyone could even predict that period of time, and also something that in hindsight, together with the boom of Pokemon TCG during the COVID period, I think the Pokemon Go boom was key to the revival of Pokemon, because during the 3DS era, it was really struggling, especially with Yokai Watch being a great competitor. And key to all of this, all we are talking about was him applying the Blue Ocean Strategy, which is a book about a marketing theory of the same name that can give you an idea with this simple sentence I got from Wikipedia that describes the book and its strategy. The strategic moves outlined in the book create a leap in value for the company, its buyers, and its employees, while unlocking new demand and making the competition irrelevant. Does that remind you of anything? That's word for word what happened with the Wii U at first as a failed experiment, but Nintendo kept on believing in their strategy, and with the Switch, they succeeded. They unlocked a new demand, a new type of hybrid and handled system, the Switch, and created a leap in value for the company, the employees, and ultimately the buyers, making the competition irrelevant. In fact, nobody was able to compete. Sony even killed their own handheld and gave up on it fully, while Nintendo single-handedly created a new market segment. Looking back at what they did as a company was nothing short of a miracle. Nobody in 2013 could foresee Nintendo's 2020 as an example of a financial success, or something like Animal Crossing selling 50 million units on the Switch. Insane. So let's get to the second part of the video. Why do I believe the Switch 2 will be a success? Well, if you look at Nintendo's recent past, let's say the past 25-ish years, again, let's remember this is a 135 years old company, so that's of course their recent past. They always followed a successful generation of gaming consoles with a less successful, with the Wii U being the biggest fall. So naturally, I expect the Switch 2 to not be able to match the 150 million sales from Switch 1 in the end, but I think it will manage to achieve 100 million range of sales bare minimum, and in my opinion that is an incredible success considering the completely different era we're living in since the release of Switch 1 8 years ago. First of all, they are avoiding the Wii U mistake. That console hit the market and was extremely confusing for the general audience. Was it an add-on tablet? Was it just a different version of the console? Was it only for pro gamers? Wii U was never able to properly set itself on the market. It felt like a worse PS3 or Xbox 360, while Sony and Microsoft were at the same time releasing PS4 and Xbox One. Instead, when it comes to Switch 2, Nintendo decided to avoid any confusion starting with the name itself. They say right away, hey, here's the next installment, the better, bigger, improved console. No confusion, a striking difference with the number, like Sony does, but better. Many enthusiasts felt a bit disappointed, but they failed to see the point of view of the generic audience for it. We're definitely going to prefer this type of... I am old enough to remember when GameStops were still a thing, so many parents returning Wii U games or devices because somehow they were not compatible with their 2005 Wii. I know, I'm old, archaic times, but this type of people would now simply do the same and return the game to Amazon instead. With this naming, none of that nonsense is going to happen. Second point, the lack of competition. Are there other handles on the market? Of course. Steam Deck and other AMD Ryzen Z series powered systems are definitely interesting, but none of them are released at a price point of the Switch 2 with a similar package that Nintendo can offer. Dock included, detachable Joy-Cons for co-op for kids, something that parents will look into, a big focus on family games like, as an example, Mario Kart, which Nintendo was clever enough to show as a launch title. And do not underestimate this factor, since Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, what was a glorified, improved Wii U game, sold 67 million units on the Switch. That is huge. Which leads us straight to point 3, exclusives. You could already consider potentially 60 million Switch 2 already sold to Mario Kart 9 players, and the rest to Animal Crossing fans, 50 million to be exact. I don't think Switch 2 will have an emulator ready on PC before 2029, so that's 4 solid years for Nintendo games of being playable only on Nintendo's system. And if you look at Switch games who have remained exclusive, then not only a huge list, but an extremely appealing one too. Let's take a look. I personally like to keep track of the games that stay exclusive to certain consoles because I love to do some retro gaming when I have time. And for the Switch specifically, my list is at right now 66 titles. So to just name a few of the 66 titles, I will have the list on the screen for you guys to check. We have Animal Crossing New Horizons, we already talked about, ARMS, Astral Chain, Bayonetta 3, Super Mario 3D World Bowser's Fury. You have Fire Emblem titles. We have 3 Fire Emblem titles. Hyrule Warriors. You have 5 Kirby games. You have The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Then you have Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. And then you also have Skyward Sword HD and Link's Awakening. Then you have Luigi's Mansion 2 HD and Luigi's Mansion 3. Some incredible Mario games like the recent Mario and Luigi Brothership, which was totally fine. The 2 Mario Rabbids games, which are a lot of fun. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, as we saw, so we already know that Mario Kart 9 is going to take its place too. Then the Mario Party games, so we have Mario Party Superstars and Jamboree that recently came out. Then you have Metroid Dread, Metroid Prime Remastered, so we're going to have Metroid Prime 4 probably for Switch 2. Then there is also a Monster Hunter exclusive title, Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. Then more Mario, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, which is of course a Wii U remake. Then you have Paper Mario, The Origami King, and Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. Then you have Pikmin 3, Pikmin 4, and then all the Pokemon game, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, Legends Arceus, Legends EA, here it is, Mystery Dungeon Deluxe, Scarlet and Violet, Sword and Shield, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Then the experimental Pokken Tournament Deluxe was not too bad. Then Splatoon, which is not too big here in the West, but in Japan it sells so well. So we have Splatoon 2 and 3 for Switch 1, and you can bet that Switch 2 is gonna get Splatoon 4 and eventually 5 too. Then Super Kirby Clash. Then again some more Mario, Super Mario 3D All Stars, Super Mario Wonder, Super Mario Maker 2, Super Mario Odyssey, which I love. Again Super Mario Party, again Super Mario RPG. Then Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Then some Wario games, and then all the Xenoblade games, which we are getting another one soon too. So is this list enough for you to convince you of the amazing titles the Switch has? So yeah, even just looking at those titles, I believe that the console simply needs to release 5 main first-party exclusives each year in its first 40 years, so we're talking about 20 games total, to cement itself as a perceived success, a perceived must-have for gamers in general, and especially PC gamers, in my opinion, who are looking for that little, company console, that extra little device to play things that they might not get on their PC, which is not a Sony console anymore, since we're getting most first-party Sony games eventually, like the recent Spider-Man 2 that released on PC also, and third-party first-time exclusive on consoles like Square Enix games, who have recently announced that they are dropping this sort of exclusivity and are aiming at contemporary release. They're aiming at same time release between PC and Sony consoles. So my prediction, well, probably the Switch 2 is gonna sell 50 million units by the end of March 2027. That is my prediction, which is going to be the end of the second fiscal year since the console's release, which I again predict to be between July to September 2025, that little room. So basically mid to end of summer, beginning of fall. And last bonus point I want to discuss is the third-party support and the NVIDIA architecture of the console, because these 2 points go hand in hand. So any third-party software developer who did not believe in the Switch because of the Wii U failure, and also because of the difference in power between the Switch and competition consoles, which were basically PS4 and Xbox One at the end of the life cycle, and then PS5 and Xbox Series at the mid-range of the Switch life cycle, because I want to remind you, those two consoles came out at the end of 2020, which is almost 4.5 years ago. These developers, these third-party software developers, are, in my opinion, gonna do a complete 180 when it comes to Switch 2 for a few simple reasons. The first one is, of course, the sheer numbers of the Switch consoles sales, which are about 150 million right now, but also the incredible amount of software sold, which is about 1.3 billion, which is more than 9 titles per console, meaning that Switch players, Switch owners do buy a ton of software, which is definitely going to attract third-party developers. And the second point is the NVIDIA architecture, meaning that the console will have access to some improvements, some little tricks up its sleeve like DLSS, which will allow the console to be able to run even games that it could not run with raw power alone, with its raw calculation power alone, which are teraflops. But with DLSS, you can have it at 720p, upscaled to 1080 in handled, and aim at that 60 FPS sweet spot, which is perfect, especially in handled. As someone who has played with a Legion Go, with a ROG Ally, with a Steam Deck, believe me, in handled, you are gonna have a hard time noticing anything better than 1080p, simply because the screen is too small. Instead, when it comes to FPS, 60 FPS is definitely the sweet spot, especially for single player story-driven games, unless you're going for anything competitive. So let's talk about something like Marvel Rivals or the Call of Duty games, Rainbow Six, CSGO. I think most players would simply just play that on PC anyways, and those who are gonna play those games on the Switch is just because they don't have another console available anyway, so they're not gonna bother with looking for having a competitive experience on such devices on consoles anyways. So that 1080p 60 FPS spot is extremely sweet, and I believe in console mode, so docked mode, the console is gonna have that 1080p 60 FPS native basically, and run with maybe a level of details that's a bit higher when necessary. So yeah, ultimately this was my analysis on the Nintendo Switch situation. Let me know what you guys think. I cannot wait to see what Nintendo is gonna tell us on April 2nd of 2025, so just 2 months from now, basically 60 days from now. And yeah, in the meantime, take care of yourselves, stay healthy, and see you soon. Bye bye.